Pues muy buenas tardes a todos. Ya dimos 5 minutitos para que terminaran de entrar algunos, así que vamos a dar comienzo. Como todos saben, el día de hoy tenemos nuestro webinar que se titula Haciendo el propósito real. Va a estar a cargo de Hailey Rushing. Por ahí les mandamos su bio, pero para quien no lo pudo leer, les platico que ella es Chief Purposologist y cofundadora del Purpose Institute. Este instituto se dedica exclusivamente a ayudar a las organizaciones a descubrir y darle vida al propósito en el corazón de la organización y los valores centrales que dan vida a la cultura. Ella también es coautora del libro It's Not What You Sell, It's What You Stand For, Why Every Extraordinary Business is Driven by Purpose, and is a contributing author to the Conscious Capitalism Field Guide, Tools for Transformation, Your Organization. Sus años trabajando de la mano de líderes en Southwest, en Walmart, en Chipotle, en Whole Foods, BMW, GE, John Deere, solo han alimentado su pasión y su compromiso para ayudar a las organizaciones en este viaje para centrarse en el propósito. Adicional, es parte del Purpose Architect at Rally Day Partners, que es una firma de capital privado donde se dedican a ayudar a fundadores a codificar su propósito mientras se preparan para crecer y escalar el impacto de su empresa. Y también es orgullosa consejera del Centro de Empresas Conscientes del TEC de Monterrey, con quien saben compartimos la membresía del Círculo de Dirección Consciente. Habiendo hecho esta presentación, pues entonces le paso los micrófonos a Hailey para que pueda empezar el webinar. Thank you, Hailey, for being here. Everyone knows who you are, so please, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, it's such a pleasure to be with you, and it's been such a pleasure to watch the ascendance and the adoption of conscious capitalism in Mexico, which is wonderful to see as we've seen the ascendance of purpose all around the world. Let me go ahead and share my screen, get situated here for just a second.
I forgot to say something. So, para todos, como vamos a llevar la reunión, es que Hailey nos va a hacer la presentación que va a compartir ahorita y al final vamos a dar espacio para preguntas y respuestas. Entonces, si quieren ir escribiendo sus preguntas en el chat, al final las vamos a leer. Thank you, Hailey.
Okay. Hopefully, okay, are you ready for me to take it away?
Please take it away.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, as I said, it's a pleasure to be with you here this evening. I'm joining you from Austin, Texas, where it is a lovely day and coming to a close. So my lighting is a little bit strange, but I'm excited to talk to you about how to think about making purpose real in your organization. I had the good fortune of having extraordinary purpose-driven mentors when I was just starting out in the world. My background is cultural anthropology, and I started working in advertising agencies. And one in particular, GSD&M in Austin, Texas, happened to have 3 clients that would teach me everything I know about purpose, all the way back in like 1996, 97. And those 3 clients were Southwest Airlines, that had the extraordinary founder, Herb Kelleher, who really believed in creating an airline that served essentially the masses that were in their cars, that were in buses, that were in trains. And he had a vision about democratizing the skies. And we kind of helped articulate his purpose as giving people the freedom to fly, that they weren't just in the discount airline business, they were in the freedom business. Another client that taught me a whole lot about purpose was Walmart, back when Sam Walton was still the CEO of the organization. And if you spend any time looking at their history, you'll know that he was incredibly passionate about saving people money and helping them live better. And in fact, at the end of his life, when he was asked about his legacy that he hoped to leave, that's precisely what he said. In his own words, I hope I helped people save a little bit money and help them live a little bit better. And then finally, John Mackey, another one of the clients at the agency I worked at was Whole Foods. And he is obviously a very purpose-driven leader and the pioneer behind conscious capitalism. And there was an animating purpose that was driving Whole Foods from day one. And that was this concept of nourishing people and planet. And so very early on in my career, having had the just good fortune and blessing of working with purpose-driven leaders, it became very apparent to myself and the other leaders of the agency of GSD&M that these brands had become the high-performing companies and the beloved brands that they were, not because of our great advertising, although that was good, but because they had actually paid the price to have a higher sense of purpose that drove their business. And because they had built businesses that actually made a difference in people's lives, they became beloved brands. And so we ended up writing a book called It's Not What You Sell, It's What You Stand For, that really tried to capture everything that we learned from visionary leaders like Herb Kelleher, John Mackey, Sam Walton, and others about if you want a great brand, if you want to earn the right to be invited into people's homes, if you want to have a company that people welcome open arms into their community, then you need to have a clear and compelling core purpose. And the way that we define purpose is it's just a definitive statement about the difference you're trying to make in the world. So I'm going to take the next 30 minutes to kind of share with you some of the purpose principles I've learned doing 20 years of this work. I'll share with you best practices, and I'll always try to anchor it with some case studies that bring it to life in a meaningful, practical way. I'll ask you to kind of try it on. Think about how a principle I've shared applies to your organization. Maybe take some notes, because I'd love for you to share your own ahas, insights, or reflections at the end of our session. And then please feel free to jot down questions along the way, and we'll have hopefully time for a robust Q&A at the end. Okay, so I'm going to start by introducing you to the concept of something we call the purpose flywheel. So I'm going to assume that many of you have a purpose already, or at least the notion of a purpose, and are really intrigued by how do I actually bring my purpose to life in a meaningful way? How do I activate it and embed it throughout my organization? And one of the concepts that we share with companies, or that we've learned, is that great companies that really have a strong sense of purpose do three things really well. And you can kind of think of it like a flywheel. They communicate their purpose consistently and sincerely and seriously. They cultivate the purpose in everything they do, and then they celebrate the impact that they make in the world. And they can do that continuously. So when you think about communicating your purpose, you want to make sure everyone in your organization is aware of the purpose and that it's something they actually care about and believe in. Then you want to enable and empower your people to cultivate the purpose. So ask yourself, do our people have the know-how and the training they need to actually support the purpose? Do they have the ability to fulfill the purpose? Are they actually using it to drive decision-making and to shape the things that are on their to-do list? And then are you actually recognizing and rewarding people who fulfill the promise of the purpose? Can people see and hear and feel and know the difference that they're making in the world? So, and those three things, you get those three things going, and it's kind of hard in the beginning. The communication has to be very intentional. You have to really start building the muscle of, are we looking at everything and thinking about it as an opportunity to fulfill the purpose? Are we celebrating it so people can see the difference that we're trying to make? And this flywheel, it's a cumulative process. And I'm going to let Jim Collins talk about it. He was one of our mentors, because about half of the clients at the agency I worked at were clients that were featured in his book, Built to Last. And if you're familiar with Jim Collins, you know that when he studied these high-performing organizations that were built to last, his expression, and he kind of reverse engineered what was at the heart of those companies, they all had a strong sense of purpose and a set of core values that shaped everything they did. And that was the animating driving force of their high performance. But I love this clip. It's about 2 minutes long, where he talks about, when you think about the inflection point for these companies, it didn't come in a snap. It comes as the result of taking very intentional steps, taking actions, that are done consistently in a disciplined way over time. And then all of a sudden you get what looks like a spectacular result. I'll let you hear it from him.
One of the key disciplines for building a great organization is to recognize that it is never a single event. It is a cumulative process. There's no big bang, no big breakthrough, no big aha. Rather, it's like pushing a giant heavy flywheel, a big metal disc. You start pushing and you push and you push, and after a lot of effort, you get one giant, slow, creaky turn. But you don't stop. You keep pushing, and you push and you push and you push, and after a lot of effort, you get 2 turns. And you keep pushing, and you get 4, and 8, and 16, and 32, 64, 100, 1,000, 10,000. At some point, that flywheel is making a big whoosh as you hit a point of breakthrough. When we did the Good to Great research, we had a wonderful interview with one of the executives, and he had this perfect Good to Great curve. 40 years of oppressive mediocrity, followed by a punctuation point, and then bang, that curve started to climb and climb and climb and climb. We could pinpoint the moment of the upward inflection to the precise day, June 30, 1975. But you see, when we asked the executive, when was your breakthrough from good to great? When did it happen? When was the big aha? He had a wonderful response. Well, I would say our breakthrough happened sometime between 1971 and 1980. I mean, what's going on? Here we have the chief executive who led a company from good to great. We looking in from the outside, we can see the precise moment of breakthrough. June 30, 1975, precisely. He was chief executive. He can't see it any tighter than a 9-year window. I'd like you to picture an egg just sitting there. And nothing's happening and everybody's walking by and there's just this dormant egg, and then one day the egg cracks open and out jumps a chicken. Forbes, Fortune, Businessweek, Wall Street Journal, Vogue, Glamour, they all come swooping in and want to write articles. Remarkable transformation of egg into chicken.
I love that metaphor, that example of, let's see.
One of the key
of something that looks spectacular from the outside just happening, like they just became a purpose-driven overnight sensation, but really that's the result of incubating and curating and cultivating your purpose over a long period of time. And then you have these extraordinary breakthroughs where people say, you really are a purpose-driven organization. So just when you think about that, communicate, cultivate, and celebrate, where does your purpose flywheel need a push in your organization? Sometimes people know that they haven't communicated it as consistently as they should be, or it's not being cultivated in their strategy, in their innovation, in their R&D, and their M&A as thoughtfully as it should be, or they're not actually, maybe they're communicating it and cultivating, but they're not taking the time to actually celebrate and share the successes that make people feel fulfilled and gratified by their work. So think about, for you, where are you and where does your flywheel need a push? So that's really the catalyst for this whole conversation, is that is recognizing that most people know there's some kind of breakdown in the system where their purpose isn't being lived to the fullest extent possible. Because today, in the era that we find ourselves in, about 90% of executives believe at this point that purpose matters. You see really high rates of executives agreeing that purpose is going to drive employee satisfaction. It's going to be a key to successful transformation. It creates higher quality offerings, greater customer loyalty. And yet, less than 50% of executives say that they're actually purpose-driven organizations. Only about 50% say their strategy reflects the purpose, and about 1/3 of the staff understand and are committed to the purpose, and about 1/3 say that their business model is actually aligned with the purpose. So there's a big gap between belief and purpose and actually executing and embedding the purpose in the business. And that's what we want to talk about today. And the first thing I always like to impress upon organizations is that your purpose isn't a separate set of activities. Like, we've got our core business activities here, and then we've got some purpose things we're going to do on the side. Your purpose should be central to everything that you do. I liken it to as a way of life. And I think the life is as an acronym for your purpose should be the lens I filter everything through. So whatever you're doing, whatever's on your to-do list, you can look at every priority and ask yourself, is this going to help us fulfill our purpose? And if it is, be all in. But if it's not, maybe you could deprioritize it. You should look at what's on your to-do list and ask yourself, how could I make this an opportunity to fulfill the purpose? Every single one of us has an abundance of things on the to-do list. And with a little bit of intentionality to say, okay, I have to do this thing. Is there any way, shape, or form that I could look at it through the lens of my purpose and make it into something that is the fulfillment or the expression of our purpose? And I'll share several examples from Southwest that do that. And if you're truly committed to fulfilling your purpose, what should be on your to-do list that isn't? Sometimes you know exactly what needs to be done. It just hasn't been prioritized in that way. So let me tell you a little bit about, again, Southwest Airlines was the very first company that I really came to appreciate the power of purpose in driving a business. And we had been doing the advertising and marketing for Southwest Airlines for probably 15 years. And Herb Kelleher came one day and said, at this point, I think people know how we're different. They know we're low fares. They know we're frequent flights. They know we've got the friendliest people in the sky. What I want to know is what difference we make. And so when I started asking people, what difference has Southwest made in your life? We heard things like, well, because of Southwest, I've had the freedom to fly. I've had the freedom to grow my business on their route lines. So we said, you know what, Herb, you're not in the discount airline business. You're in the freedom business. And that's how they articulated their purpose of giving people the freedom to fly. But when we landed on that freedom concept, you don't want your purpose, you want your purpose to be very genuine in terms of reflecting the difference your business makes. You also want it to be very generative in terms of thinking and being a catalyst for new expressions of your purpose. So if you put freedom at the core, one of the first things that we did was we stopped to think about what does freedom mean for our own employees? And so we created an employee value proposition that was inspired by the concept of freedom and came up with 7 employee freedoms, where they had the freedom to solve problems, they had the freedom to bring their personalities to work, they had the freedom to grow their careers, they had the freedom to fly, and on like that. So it's interesting to think about, how does your purpose take shape for your employees? We also thought about it in terms of competitive differentiation. In the year 2008, when the industry tanked, a lot of other airlines compensated for that lost revenue by charging for bags. At the time, Gary Keller was the CEO of Southwest Airlines, and he said, you know what, we're in the freedom business, and if we start charging for bags, it's going to trespass against our fundamental purpose. So we're not going to do it. And so we started a campaign called Bags Fly Free. And we actually ended up getting about $1 billion with a B in new revenue. We joke charging for free because of all of the people that switched to Southwest Airlines as a result of us staying true to our purpose and them being upset with the other airlines trying to take advantage of them. We developed a loyalty program, Rapid Rewards. This is a good example of, like, you may have something on your to-do list that doesn't seem like it's an opportunity to fulfill your purpose, but like when we had to develop a loyalty program, we said, well, what's the problem with most loyalty programs in the airline industry? Is that you're not usually free to use them. There's too many blackout dates or restrictions. And so we developed Rapid Rewards where you could have 100% of the redemptions or 100% of the seats on a plane, Rapid Reward redemptions, and we had the fewest blackout dates in the industry. So you're actually free to use your rewards. We started something called, we thought about a freedom in terms of how could we fulfill the business strategy of optimizing the load factors. When that plane takes off, that inventory is gone, and we want to make sure that we've optimized our loads, but we also want to give people freedom. So we developed something called Ding, and it's a little downloadable app that people can be alerted when there's a flight to somewhere they want to go at a very affordable price. And so it fulfills our business objective of occupying the seat, but also gives people the freedom to take a trip that they might not have taken otherwise. We developed some promotions, Friends Fly Free, which is this notion of, instead of just giving them a discount, let them We worked with revenue modeling to figure out how they could bring a friend along for free. We developed cultural nomenclature. Instead of just being a gate agent or a flight attendant, we're now freedom fighters. And we don't just launch a new market, we liberate markets and throw freedom parades on Main Street when we come to town. And lastly, the advertising helps tell the story of the company. Ding, you are now free to move about the country has been their operative tagline for 20 years. So I love that example of when you have a purpose, just use it to look at everything you're doing. So what's on your to-do list right now that could be an opportunity to fulfill your purpose? Just think about it. There's probably a bunch of things you have to do that just with a little bit of intentionality, a little bit of creativity, you could think about it as an opportunity for another expression of your purpose. Conversely, use your purpose to create a stop doing list. This is one of some people's favorite thing about purpose is it gives them permission to stop doing a whole bunch of stuff that's not relevant to the fulfillment of their purpose. And you also want to stop doing things that might be undermining the credibility of your purpose. Oftentimes when we work with companies that have a very powerful, strong purpose, there's an elephant in the room. And if you ask anybody in that company, they can tell you, you know what, until we handle that, it's hard to talk about our purpose with a straight face. And I would say one of the boldest moves I've ever seen a company make was CVS, where their purpose is helping people on their path to better health. And you might be able to imagine what the elephant in the room was for CVS. It was selling tobacco products, selling cigarettes. So if you're going to be a company that says our purpose is to put people on the path to better health, you've got a big decision to make. Are you going to be in integrity with that purpose? Or are you going to just kind of ignore it because of the revenue that you get from selling tobacco products? And they made the very bold decision to give up $2 billion in revenue and stop selling tobacco products. And as a result, they actually found that 38% of their customers were more likely to stop buying cigarettes altogether. That was actually published in the Journal of Public Health. So they actually did really help put people on a path to better health by making cigarette and tobacco products less accessible, and took the hit from a revenue perspective too. So what might you stop doing to be in greater alignment with your purpose? Is there anything that you just know deep in your soul or your spirit, we really shouldn't be doing that if that's going to be our purpose? And bring the right people together to figure out what you're going to do about it. The next thing I want to talk about is how you can put purpose at the core of your strategy. Now, I know probably on everyone's to-do list is how do we grow the business? And there was a great study that came out by the Harvard Business Review that they were studying companies that had an average compound growth rate of 30% or more over 5 years. And they were looking at all the typical growth strategies like creating new markets, serving bigger needs, changing the rules of the game. And the surprising, unexpected driver of growth that they hadn't considered going into the study was purpose. And it's pretty fascinating. What they found was in low growth companies spent all of their time and energy thinking about their category and how to fight it out for market share, where gains were super incremental and costly. The high growth companies that they found really thought about their purpose and they considered where to play in order to fulfill that purpose. And it really opened up a whole new ecosystem of opportunity. And one of the most compelling examples that they highlighted in that story was the difference between Nestle Purina and Mars Pet Care. And the fascinating thing is both of these companies had kind of similar purpose statements. Nestle Purina expressed their purpose as being guided by the belief that pets and people are better together. In their case, that idea was primarily executed in just marketing and social media. And their strategic focus remained on pet food. And there's only so much you can do if you're just thinking about the category of pet food. You can come up with different flavors, different formulas, different packaging, maybe breed specific, but you can see you're kind of fighting it out for just incremental costly gains within a very saturated environment. Mars Pet Care, on the other hand, their purpose, creating a better world for pets, they really put that notion, okay, if we are passionate about our purpose and we want to create a better world for pets, well, then what is the larger pet ecosystem that we need to be playing in? Let's optimize life for pets. So that's Sergeant Pepper. That's my dog in this. That's a gratuitous use of my little pup. But they thought much more expansively beyond just food. They started opening doggy daycare centers. They acquired pet hospitals. They got into veterinary services. They developed smart collars that measure the behavior of your pets, so you have an indicator if there's something awry. They started something called the Leap Venture Studio to support innovative pet care products. They started a venture capital fund for innovators in this space. And they started something called the Pet Cities Initiative, where they worked with cities to make them more pet friendly, whether that was dog parks or water stations or pet friendly restaurants and businesses. They really took it. And as a result, pet care has become Mars Inc.'s largest and fastest growing division. So it's just a perfect example of your purpose can either just be something you talk about in advertising, which is fine, but it's just not going to get you very far. Or it can be something super powerful that you put at the core of your strategy and open up your mind to what is your field of play. So if you put your company's purpose at the core of your growth strategy, what might you do? What would be a new field of play that might emerge as a result of that? This next one I want to talk about is how to use purpose to drive alignment. This is particularly important for a portfolio company when there's a parent company that has a lot of different entities that are part of it, but it's true for any organization. You want to think about how can we get everybody on the same page with the purpose. And I want to share with you a case study from VF. VF is one of the largest apparel manufacturers on the planet. You probably recognize these brands, Vans, the North Face, Timberland, Dickies, great brands. And when we got in there and really started talking to the leaders of each one of those brands, we realized that what they cared most about wasn't producing more fashion. What these brands were originally created for was to serve an active lifestyle. The Van Dorfs who started the Vans were active skateboarders, and they wanted to create gear that was the most supportive of that lifestyle. Same for the North Face, same for JanSport. These were all originally intended to be lifestyle brands that outfitted people participating in those. And when we talked when we really understood some of their challenges, probably the biggest threat that VF faces isn't other apparel manufacturers. That's their competitive set, but their biggest competitor is really the rise in sedentary lifestyles. If you're an active lifestyle outfitter and people are staying at home behind screens all day, then you don't have a business. So that was kind of insight number one, is that we need to get people off the couch and back participating in the active lifestyles that these brands were designed to support. And the second big insight was that the apparel manufacturing business is actually quite culpable in destroying the very environments that these active lifestyles are made for. And so if we're going to be in the active lifestyle business, we need to reimagine the way that we manufacture apparel so that we have the environments that these lifestyles take root in. So we ended up crafting the core purpose of VF is this notion of to power a movement of sustainable and active lifestyles for the betterment of people and our planet. So get out of just the apparel business and get into the business of powering movements of sustainable and active lifestyles. And so one of the first things that we wanted to do is, okay, if that's the purpose of VF, we wanted to go brand by brand in the portfolio and make sure every single brand was clear on what is the active lifestyle that you are going to advocate and champion. And so each brand had to go through this purpose exercise to get crystal clear on how they were, again, facilitating an active lifestyle in a sustainable way. And if a brand didn't have a good answer to that, it actually had M&A implications. There were several brands that they ended up divesting themselves of because they were more fashion brands and they weren't in alignment with the overarching VF purpose. And there were other brands that were acquired and brought in because they were active lifestyle sustainable brands. So that's one of the things, kind of cleaning up your portfolio so that it's all aligned and reports to the overarching purpose. We also want a purpose-aligned organization. So you want to think about, how does each functional area within your organization contribute to the fulfillment of purpose? That's one of the biggest breakdowns that we see in companies, is there's the purpose that people might believe in and they gravitate to, they like it, but they don't understand how what they do contributes to the fulfillment of it. So it's worth getting teams together in your company to say, okay, in this case, retail, how do our retail operations support our purpose? Well, in this case, instead of just thinking about building brick and mortar locations, we're going to create active lifestyle hubs that inspire people to live the lifestyle advocated by the brand. And marketing, we're going to launch empower active lifestyle movements that inspire and enable people to live active lives. The supply chain, we're going to bring sustainability to the apparel supply chain for the betterment of workers and planet. And then finally, in human resources, it was fun. This is where, like, how do you turn your purpose inside for your people? We were doing this EVP, employee value proposition. I'll dig into this one a little bit more. And I asked people what the purpose meant to them. And there was a gentleman from one of their distribution centers who said, I want VF to power my movement. I want a sustainable and active life at work. And so we actually thought about, okay, from VF's employee value proposition is, we're going to power your movement through a sustainable and active life at work. And sustainable and active career development, what does it mean to have a sustainable career here for you? For some people, that's mastery. For some people, that's leadership in general. What does the sustainable and active work lifestyle feel like? So they were really on the road to work-life flexibility early on, pre-pandemic. We wanted a sustainable and active work environment. So that meant LEED certified buildings, fitness centers, walk and talk conference rooms. And then they developed a special kind of sabbatical program where you could join the movement of actively making life better for others. And maybe you would go visit a factory in overseas to see how the conditions could be made better or the impact on the environment could be improved. So that was the EVP expression. And then finally, one of the last things we did at VF was we wanted to connect each person with their personal purpose. So we partnered with Aaron Hurst at Imperative, and we helped over, I think, 7,000 VF employees go through a series of questions and exercises to help them identify their personal purpose. And then we connected each person's personal purpose to how that actually contributed to the overall fulfillment of VF's purpose. So that one, just through and through, I love the VF case study, because not only do we articulate the purpose, we pushed it through the portfolio down to the functional level, down to the employee level, and then down to the personal purpose level, so that it was a really cohesive purpose architecture that really connected everyone to the purpose. So does everyone in your company understand their role in fulfilling the promise of the purpose? Are there teams that might be feeling left out that you might need to help them connect the dots a little bit? Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about using purpose to drive employee engagement and fulfillment. This is really that kind of celebrate piece where you want to make sure people understand the impact of their work. This is a great quote from John Mackey, the founder of Conscious Capitalism, where he said, it's impossible to truly inspire the creators of customer happiness, the employees, with the ethic of profit maximization. Maximizing profits may excite investors, but I assure you most employees don't get very excited about it, even if they accept it as a legitimate goal of business. It's my experience that employees get very excited and inspired by a business that has an important purpose. So, and we know again from data that people are 5 times more excited to work for a company that spends time reflecting on their impact in the world. And part of that's because today, most people get their sense of purpose through their work, for better or worse, and that's a whole other presentation, but 70% of people source their meaning in life in their work. So I say that because it's so important to make sure you don't forget, once you're doing all these great things, to close the loop and bring the impact you're making back into your companies and share those stories with your people. GE is a company I've worked with for years. They do a great job. GE Aviation, they bring in those fighter pilots back into the factories to talk to those literal rocket scientists to say, hey, because of that GE engine, I was able to fly my fighter jet over enemy lines and return safely back to my wherever I needed to land. Or GE Healthcare, they bring in cancer survivors who, due to the GE equipment, they were able to detect tumors at an early stage and have their lives saved. Or GE Additive is 3D printing. They bring in people who, in this case, this was a boy named Jacob who 3D prints new prosthetic limbs every 6 months as he grows, and he can do that in an affordable and adaptive way because of the equipment from GE Additive. And so you can imagine the pride and fulfillment that people working behind the scenes in these B2B industrial businesses feel when those stories of impact are shared with them. So don't forget that piece. How are you celebrating your impact in the world? Last thing I want to talk about is, if you're doing all this, I really encourage every company to think about, obviously you're going to have key performance indicators. Those are essential, but don't forget to develop key purpose indicators. When I say key purpose indicators, it's exactly what I mean. I want you to think about, how would we measure and monitor whether or not we're fulfilling our purpose? And it's important to do both. I love this quote from the CEO of Mars: performance without purpose isn't meaningful, but purpose without performance isn't possible. You gotta have both. Like, it's essential to have both. So how do you know if you're fulfilling your purpose? Like, I'll give you 3 quick examples. So Walmart, save people money and help them live better. Their key purpose indicators is they actually measure the impact on cost of living. And households that live within 7 miles of a Walmart, on average, save $3,200 a year on their cost of living. And they ask people, that's another easy way to do it in your attitude and usage studies. Walmart saves me money and helps me live better. And when they ask that to their customers, about 90% agree with that. Southwest Airlines, giving people the freedom to fly. We've actually measured, when they started, only 15% of the population had flown back in the 70s. Now it's over 90%. And they worked with the Department of Transportation to measure the impact on travel when Southwest enters a market. And it's about a 20% increase. And it's officially called the Southwest effect. So that's another indicator of more people having the freedom to travel. Lastly, First United Bank is a purpose-driven bank that espouses the purpose of to inspire and empower people to spend life wisely. Now, that's a big purpose for a bank, and you don't want to just measure that in checking accounts or deposit accounts. So we worked with an organization to develop something that we call the Spend Life Wisely Index. And we actually measure improvements in the 4 pillars of Spend Life Wisely, which are financial well-being, health, personal growth, and faith. And we can actually track amongst our employees, customers, and the community at large the impact that interacting with First United has on those 4 elements of what we say is contribute to a life well spent. So what would be a good key purpose indicator for your organization? What could you measure that would give you an indication that you are fulfilling your purpose? Okay, I always talk too long. I'm so sorry. But I just wanted to give you as many kind of best practices and frameworks for thinking about how to make purpose real, and give you enough case studies. I always find it it's helpful to actually see what these concepts look like in action. So I hope that was helpful. But I look forward to hearing your own reflections from any of the question prompts that were posed to you, as well as just additional questions you have. And I'm going to take it out of sharing mode so that I can see you guys. Okay. Hi.
¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta? Si la quieren hacer en español, con mucho gusto la podemos pasar a inglés. Gabriel, adelante, estás en mute.
Okay, sorry. Hi, Hailey. Good to hear from you. So, question for you. So, I've seen some organizations here in Mexico that move forward with defining their purpose, and once they have it defined, they have the purpose statement, they stop there. For some reason, the whole process of communicating that down and making sure everybody understands the purpose, and the BF example you gave was very, very detailed. It went by departments and all the way to personal purpose. that level of effort requires a lot of commitment. No, and sometimes someone can argue it might distract from the daily business activities. I know you wouldn't agree with that, but some people might say that. But the question here is, what would be the easy, quote unquote, easy next step to take once you have your purpose defined? What would you do if you were in a company and say, okay, I have limited resources, limited time, I have defined our purpose, what do I do next? What will be your recommendation?
Well, I would say that if the purpose was done well, if it was formed well, there would be ample evidence that they were fulfilling it in ways, or otherwise it wouldn't have emerged as a purpose. So what you want to do, I would say, if you were going to do one thing, is identify the gaps. Like, where are you not living your purpose? And where are you not living your purpose in a big, obvious way that until you fulfill it, until you close the gap or address it, everyone is going to hear the purpose and give a collective eye roll. So if I was going to say, if you were going to do one thing, is figure out where you're not living your purpose in the most, I would say, egregious way or obvious way, and tackle that one thing. I mean, I can tell you the CVS example. I mean, can you imagine the signal that sent throughout the organization to give up a $2 billion line of business in service of the being in alignment with the purpose? And that one signal then gives permission for thousands of people to start thinking about, well, how should I be acting in ways that are more in alignment with the purpose?
Thank you.
One other thing I'll just say, it's a big problem now, companies articulating their purpose and then not doing anything with it. And there's a lot of data to show that that's actually more harmful than not having a purpose at all, because you get people very excited about, oh, that's what my company's supposed to be about. And when they don't see the company taking any meaningful action, it actually creates more cynicism and more disengagement. So I personally, to me, it doesn't do me or conscious capitalism any favors for people to be slapping purpose on a wall, but not walking the talk. I'd rather you wait until you have the right leaders and the right yearning in place and then do it, versus doing it in a half-bit way and making everybody disappointed. That's my own little rant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tis?
Hi, Hailey. Thank you for the presentation. It was amazing. I was wondering, in your experience, have you seen companies change or modify their purpose, like in their lifetime? Or I think I could ask it in another way. Do you, or have you seen any purposes becoming obsolete and having to be tweaked and changed or updated, if you will?
Right. No, it's a really good question. And I mean, the way my bias is to think about purpose should be something that's more timeless, that's enduring, timeless concept. So I'll give you one of my favorite examples. Charles Schwab is an investment company in the U.S., I think, but Charles Schwab originally, their purpose is stated as to be a relentless ally for the individual investor. That's why they exist. Now, how they do that has evolved almost every decade. To be an ally for the individual investor in the 70s meant being a discount broker. To be an ally for the individual investor in the 80s meant to have a one-stop shop for all of their needs. In the 90s, it meant an online resource. In the 2000s, it meant unconflicted advice. So their business model was always evolving, but it was always with the intention of how do we fulfill our purpose given where the market is today or given what investors need today. So I like that idea of, if you've articulated your purpose to capture your why, then your how can evolve all day long, but your why stays true. Now, that said, I'll give you my counterexample using Southwest. So under Herb Kelleher and Colleen, for I would say 15 years, they conceived of their purpose as giving people the freedom to fly. And I just love the notion of freedom. To me, like, freedom never goes out of style. It's something people always need and want. And we thought about all these different ways to bring it to life. At a certain point, when they'd gone from 15% of the market had flown to 90, now it's 95, 96% of people have flown. There was discussions internally at Southwest, and they said, well, mission accomplished. Like, the skies have been democratized. We now need to move on. And so they actually have evolved away from the concept of that being their purpose. And some would argue that they've seen, I don't want to comment on the current state of their business, but it's definitely been they haven't been as clearly a purpose-driven organization as they were with Herb and Colleen. So that's the other part of the answer, is the leaders matter. So oftentimes purpose will change when the leadership changes, because you need the leaders to be deeply committed and passionate about the purpose. And if there's a new leadership era at a company, it's not uncommon for the purpose of the company to evolve to reflect what that leadership team deems to be the greatest opportunity for impact in the world.
Understood. Thank you.
Anyone else? Do you have any other questions or comments?
And I always love to hear people share how they're bringing their purpose to life in their organizations, or how you might have developed key purpose indicators in your own organization to track and monitor how you're doing against your purpose. So if anybody just wants to share any stories from your own organizations, I always love to hear that.
Well, we do have a couple of members here that have developed these KPIs, but I don't know if they want to share it. I don't know, Patty or Lilian, or if you want to share something, or because I know you've been working on that, and I do believe that you have very good advances in that path.
Okay. Well, I do belong to a group of schools in all around Mexico, and I think that the sense of purpose begins with the sense of self. When we speak about education in our country, is not just passion and being vocal about it, but being very consistent and sensible to things that matters. So I don't think that's hard finding a purpose because it's hiding somewhere. But we're mostly probably afraid of putting this declaration of purpose. Sometimes it's like if we've been afraid of the time on expressing our real purpose at school, which is not just being the best school around, but to what comes after that. So to us, in our particular school, is what happens when our kids leave our school. What's the purpose? Where's your purpose? I mean, is the responsibility of our purpose inside our school to somewhat pave the path of the students. So it's, I don't know, it's something really brave to build the purpose for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, I encourage you to be bold. It's interesting how the more ambitious the purpose declarations are, sometimes the more leaders can be reluctant to talk about it, because in a way it puts a target on your back. You're like, okay, if that's the business that you say you're in, well, show me the show me the proof. And we see that a lot in sustainability world, where when companies state a desire to meet certain, to promote a cleaner world or whatever it is, and they have genuine intentions to do so, but they know they have a long way to go from where they are to where they want to be, they're reluctant to talk about it. And all of the data shows that as long as you're transparent about saying, look, this is the ambition. We know the reality doesn't look like that, but that's okay. That just shows us where we've got work to do. And every year we're going to do our best to get closer and closer to making the kind of impact we want to make. I think transparency is the key to feeling comfortable, confident, and courageous with sharing your purpose and not being, not letting the current state scare you away from stating the ambition in a bold way. There's actually in the Whole Foods market years ago, wrote something called the Declaration of Interdependence. And it talks about the interdependency of all stakeholders. And one of the things I love about that document is at the very end, I wish I had it in front of me. At the very end, it talks about how there will always be a gap between their ambition and the reality. And that's precisely where the work is to be done, that they should never be dissuaded or disheartened by the reality. That should be precisely what catalyzes action. So I always like that sense of, I don't know, the gap is what you need in order to know where the work is to be done.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Hailey. Does anyone else have any comment or questions? Okay. So thank you very much to you, Hailey. It was a very, very enlightening presentation. Thank you very much for the examples that you gave. I think that gives a lot of clarity on how to make the purpose real, on how to bring it to life, on how to live it day by day. So thank you very much for that. And thank you very much to everyone here. So see you on our next webinar. Thank you, Hailey.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.